Scottish Horse, a justifiably proud body of men who every year get together at Dunkeld in Perthshire, which has been their headquarters since before the First World War, and where the man who was to become the 8th Duke of Atholl, Lord Tullybarden, was their Colonel Commandant. He'd won his spurs in Lord Kitchener's campaign in the Sudan, and in 1900, during the South African War, was given the commission of raising a regiment of mounted infantry from among South Africans of Scots descent. And that was the beginning of the Scottish Horse. Wearing their hard-won military crosses, military medals, and many other distinctions, over 100 former comrades of both world wars from all over Scotland and England, and several from overseas, renewed their friendships last weekend, as they do every year, and shared again the spirit of wartime, reminding each other of exploits almost forgotten. Some of the memories go back a very long way. Take James Robertson, for instance, who saw action on the Somme, at Ypres, in the First Battle of Arras, Vimy Ridge, Macedonia, Salonika, Amiens, and the Argonne. He told me when he joined the Scottish Horse.
In the spring of 1916, I forget the month, it would be March or April 1916, and by August 1916, I was in France, transferred from the Scottish Horse to the Black Watch, and I joined them at Thiepval and Longueval on the Somme, and I fought through the Somme battle here to November 1916, the bloodiest part of it, and then the transferred my battalion, which was the 8th Battalion, the 9th Scottish Division, transferred us to Ypres, the Ypres front. We were a short time at Ypres front, and they took us back out of there and put us into Arras to start the first Battle of Arras, when Hindenburg had built his new line across the whole of France, and he swore that no one on earth would ever put them out of there, and we put them out of there. And I want to tell you, about 4 days in the trenches, you couldn't stand any longer, because by the time you were there, until you come out, and all you could see was the sky above you then for 4 days, and then you come out and you got a rest and back in again, shouting in all the time.
And what were conditions like in the trenches?
Oh, terrible. No one will ever know what it was like. We had the kilt on, and we weren't allowed to wear anything underneath the kilt, and it was murder. We've had many a miserable night, soaked to the skin. You never got changed, or no changing, and you come out the way you went in, rain, hail, or shine.
What about supplies in the trenches?
Well, you couldn't get them up hardly, it was impossible. We had hardly any meat. We had biscuits, a poke of biscuits, and a bit of cheese and a tin of bully between so many. And there was one time at Irish that I'm quite sure it was nearly 3 days before we ever had a bite. Oh, nobody will ever know what it was like.
When you joined up, Jimmy, in 1916,
yes,
what did you think you were going to?
Oh, I didn't. Oh, we thought it would be great fun. Like all one else.
Another veteran Scottish horseman of that First World War was William Mowat, who fought in the tragically historic campaign at Gallipoli in 1915 and 1916. But a year earlier, in 1914, he didn't even know that war had broken out.
Well, I'll tell you, the war was practically days old before I knew it was on, because an old chap and I were working up on putting up a fence along the wind and watershed between Strathbran and Logiamond. And we had gone up on the Monday morning, and war broke out with France, I think, on the Monday morning, but of course we knew nothing about it. And, you know, when you're young, you weren't reading papers or anything like that. And so then, no one come near us, though. We were living in a tent. No one come near us until we come down to Harrietfield and Muggy Miller's pub. It was the place that old Jimmy made for. Well, I was 21 by the time war broke out, so I was kind of teetotal, but taking a port or something. And so then the drainers were putting the water truck into Glenalmond College, and they come across the river into the pub, and that was the first we heard the war was on. And that was on the Saturday, and war had broken out on the Monday. Well, I went away up the hill the next week. I had seen the Black Watch going away, and so got onto the train, and had gone up, and we were another week up on the hill, and I said to my old friend Jimmy, I says, I'll go and join up, I think. Tully Barton, you see, had 2 regiments of Scottish horse, and to make a brigade he was asked to raise another regiment. So that was where I went to join the Scottish horse up in Dunkeld here.
2 men now well into their 80s. But it was another generation that rallied round the flag when their country needed them again, more than 20 years later. Jackie Cooper from Aberdeen among them.
I joined the Scottish Horse in 1939 and went away, come down to Dunkeld. But when we left Aberdeen, we came down Bridge Street in horseback, which seems strange now when you see the present day things. Nanny got in front with the sergeant leading Nanny got, and us going down in horseback.
It seems extraordinary that the Scottish Horse started World War II as a cavalry regiment.
That's correct, a yeomanry regiment, not a cavalry regiment.
What's the difference?
Well, we carried sabres and rifles. Cavalry regiment is swords only. But unfortunately, the horse was finished, we changed into Royal Artillery.
You had experience of horses before you joined up?
Yes, my father used to have horses, and that's why I joined the Scottish Horse, because they had horses. And the fancy uniform with the buttons in the sleeves and the bandolier, a very smart uniform with a sabre. And that's why I joined the Scottish Horse.
How old were you when you joined up?
16, and said I was 18. Went all through the war with the Scottish Horse, and then I came back in 1948. And then did about another 18, 20 years. I remember it with the men and the people I've met, and the comradeship, wonderful. And the regiment, of course, which is not another regiment in the British Army like it. Officers and men were very close, and still are. And that's the reason why you get like 100 people coming here every year. And we're only a territorial unit, which I think is amazing.
Once a year we renew the spirit and the friendship we had. And there's a strange feeling of excitement that begins to gather in you when we begin to arrive at Dunkeld, and faces we haven't seen since the previous year loom into view. And every year there's someone who turns up for the first time since the war we haven't seen, probably from the south of England or Welsh Wales. And there's a period of staring at each other, desperately trying to remember who the hell he is. And then recognition dawns and the handshake, and gradually throughout the afternoon before the dinner, this spirit of excitement, this feeling of excitement grows and grows. And then, of course, the stories are beginning to be told, and there's always some new ones, which is fortunate for my family because they've heard the old ones so often before. Inevitably, there are some of us who didn't come back from the war, and their names are brought into conversation. And we seem to have in the Scottish Horse such a collection of characters, in inverted commas, so that there's never any shortage of tales to be told about the escapades that these lads got up to.
That's Jack Doig from Elgin. So what did they get up to?
It took about 6 months before the War Office discovered that a horse and a sabre and a rifle weren't really very practical in modern war. And as early as December 1939, we were told that we would become medium artillery. We were issued with 4 long toms, that's the First World War 60-pounder guns, which had concrete in the muzzles, and they were used to teach gun drill. And then in May of that year, of course, Dunkirk and the loss of equipment in France meant that there was no spare equipment to issue us. And one day 2 artificers arrived from Woolwich with chisels and hammers, and they knocked the concrete out of the muzzles of these guns and said, "There you are, that's your weapons." And we were sent down with these guns to the coast of Lincolnshire, where we dug gun pits and pointed them out towards the sea. And there we were, issued with the famous command to stay there until the last man in the last round to repel invasion. But of course we didn't have any ammunition, they couldn't find it. We had a chap, Eddie Bandine from Aberdeen. And Eddie was in charge of the local defence, the ACAT defence of the column when we were on the march. And his Bren gun was mounted on the water cart. So gradually Eddie became responsible for supplying the battery with clean and fresh water. And we were supporting a New Zealand brigade just slightly southwest of Bologna when we got a signal from our representative with the brigade that they had captured a vermouth factory and that we should send up as many containers as we could before the Allied military government people got their seals onto it. Bandine got wind of the broadcast and took his water cart up. So for about 4 days we couldn't get a wash or a cup of tea, but we enjoyed ourselves, and it was fairly fortunate that it was a quiet spell in the line. Like a lot more of us, I joined because I was interested in learning to ride a horse and couldn't afford riding school fees, but also because my father had been in the regiment in the First War, and I'd known a lot about the regiment from a reunion such as this that they had held in the 30s. So I'd been brought up on tales of Gallipoli and Egypt and Kantara, Elarish.
My name's Bill Buchan, Piper Buchan, Willie Buchan, and I joined the Scottish Horse in 1938, and at 17 years of age, and as a young lad we arrived here in Dunkeld in 1939 at the outbreak of war. By that time I was 17 and a half. I was probably the youngest man to leave Aberdeen, called up in the regiment.
Tell me about some of your piping experiences.
Well, there was one instance when we were taken out the line for a rest, and the village of Ghent in Belgium, and the local village band was playing in the front and the pipe band was playing behind, and we took turns in playing. This was on the way to church. After the church service, which was quite a nice service, we landed in a cafe across from the church where a little refreshment was taken. I didn't know this at the time, but suddenly I didn't have my kilt on, and it transpired that my kilt was taken off my back, and some of the girls, the Belgian girls, was trying it on, and I'd left the cafe with my pipes minus the kilt, and I didn't discover this until next day. Captain Prentice then, he couldn't believe that my kilt was actually stolen while I was wearing it.
My name's Archie Allen. I was a painter in the corporation. And when I got to McClaren, I was sent to, there was a train left the central station that was packed with all our age group. You see, we're all around about 32, 33s. So some went to a place called Ashby in Leicester. Ashby de la Zouch, and others went to Whittick. The billets were pubs. They were all pubs. And, it was it was all right, it was like bloody heaven. It was like home from home. It was teaching us to walk. With a fella, it was funny. It was a really awkward squad, you see. And with a fella, Jimmy Doyle. And Jimmy was a marvellous dancer. We'd dance, he was a marvellous dancer. He walked 2 steps and he was off his step. Never could coop. Instead of his hands going right and left, the 2 hands went up together. It was really a laugh, watching him. And it was horrible to be behind him, because you went off the same way, you see. To us, a second lieutenant was a field marshal as far as we were concerned. Whenever we seen an officer that would dive in a close rather than salute him, we were doing it wrong,
Once you got into France,
yes,
amongst the action, somehow or other you managed to find time to play a lot of football.
I did, well, I'll tell you, we played quite a lot of football. It's funny. I played quite a lot of football there. We used to play on the locals, and whenever we could get near a town or that, we played. But it was after the war, I played more in Germany, I played quite a lot. Well, we had a team, after we reached Oldenburg, that's in Germany, when war was finished then, I was really fitness mad at the time, playing football, doing anything. But this was a joke team, and we called it the Team of All Taverns Bar Football, you see. And there were no one of them could care anything about fit me, you see. And of course, I'd done the training for them. I used to get the skipping ropes. They're all sitting with pints in their hand, and I'm doing all this skipping for them.
No, you'd almost forgotten about them.
I only happened to meet them the day, some of them the day, this Snarge Anderson and who was the other fella? Oh, Sammy Simpson. It was only just seeing them the day that, it brought it all back to me.
Archie Allen from Glasgow and some of his recollections of 40 years ago. A final word from Jimmy Robertson, one of the grand old men of the 1914-18 encounter. During the Second World War, he was a policeman, but for him, the annual reunions bring back memories of almost 70 years ago and mean a great deal to him.
Unfortunately, it means that there's no real Scottish horsemen now. I mean, I'm the only survivor in Dunkeld and district of the First War Scottish horse. There's sole one left. And I like coming here when I meet a lot of friends. I wouldn't miss it.
Do you think it's important, Jimmy, to keep up these days?
Oh, absolutely.
Why is it so important?
Oh, I don't think we should never let these things die.
And that's the regimental march of the Scottish Horse, composed by Catherine Ramsay, who was the Duchess of Atholl, and played incidentally by the son of Captain Robin S. Barber, Freeland Barber, his father, a proud member of the Scottish Horse. Well, next week I'll be depending on you.